I'm Chimo Mangazi with Business Time on Times. It is a magazine program where we bring you business and economic news stories making headlines. In the program today, mixed reactions to President Lazarus Chakwera's plans to establish Presidential Private Sector Council. Also in the program, we look at performance of a number of economic sectors in 2022, including the Malawi Stock Exchange and inflation. We have these and other stories. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome. Economic experts have described the Presidential Private Sector Council as duplication of efforts, stressing there are existing entities that could achieve a similar mandate. President Lazarus Chakwera announced establishment of the council in his New Year's message to Malawians, saying names of members of the council will be announced this week. Chakwera says the council will comprise a group of private sector leaders he will be interacting with directly and regularly to appreciate the effectiveness of economic policies in creating jobs and wealth in the new year. More in this report by Justin Kweo.
In his New Year message to Malawians on Sunday evening, the president said he has directed the secretary to the president and cabinet, Colin Zamba, to announce this week names of people who have been appointed to serve as members of the council. Chakwera added that the council is a group of what he described as respected private sector leaders he will be interacting with directly and regularly to appreciate the effectiveness of economic policies in creating jobs and wealth in this new year for Malawians who struggled last year. He added that even so, he believes that if the country is to succeed, it is not enough to have good policies and good people in government, but it should also have good citizens who are vigilant against the threats that have the potential to compromise the security of resources of the country.
Although much of the economic pain exacted on us last year remains, the efforts we made, such as putting in place austerity measures, securing hundreds of millions of dollars from abroad through compacts, grants, and credit facilities, conducting public works projects across the country, rescuing our farmers from fertilizer predators, have all succeeded in stopping our economy from collapsing and laying a runway from which it can start to rise this year. But I must say that it is you, as citizens, who deserve credit for your understanding of the fact that these pains that are common to all nations have to be endured for a season as we strive for a brighter future tomorrow. And so in readiness for that brighter tomorrow, I have directed the Secretary to the President and Cabinet to announce this week the names of those I have appointed to serve as members of the Presidential Private Sector Council, which is a group of respected private sector leaders I will be interacting with directly and regularly to appreciate the effectiveness of our economic policies in creating jobs and wealth in this new year for Malawians who struggled last year. Even so, I believe that if we are going to succeed, it is not enough to have good policies and good people in government. We also need good citizens to be vigilant against the threats that have the potential to compromise the security of our resources in our country. Chief among the threats you must all be vigilant against is the public health situation that we are facing currently through the spread of cholera, which has infected over 16,000 people and claimed over 550 lives. Another threat you must watch out for is corruption. And once I am done reviewing the report to be submitted by the Commission of Inquiry into the irregular arrest of the Director General of the Anti-Corruption Bureau last month, I will make further orders to keep us on the winning side of this threat. Similarly, I urge you to be vigilant against the rising cases of human trafficking and illegal migration, the abuse of agricultural services like the Affordable Inputs Program, and the smuggling of maize to neighboring countries. These are all threats that are spread by citizens that are either careless or criminals, and it is the responsibility of every good citizen to watch out against these threats and take appropriate action to stop them from spreading and from destroying the good work we are trying to do as your servants. As your servant, I will give you a detailed progress report on the work we have done over the past year and our plan of action this year when I deliver my State of the Nation address before your representatives in Parliament next month. But today, I wanted to assure you and remind you that your participation and input as citizens who love Malawi is indispensable. And so my administration will be creating even more opportunities for you to participate in government matters going forward. After all, this is your government. And I believe that combining our own efforts to serve you as your government with opportunities for you to participate in public affairs will lead to the harvest of national prosperity and unity that we all want to see in 2023 and the years beyond.
However, Malawi has some entities which some quarters of the society believe would have performed a similar role, such as the Malawi Confederation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, the National Planning Commission, and recently the President launched the Private Sector Labs. Commenting on the matter, economist at the University of Malawi, Lucius Kassim, said the council will just add to many other bodies that would have performed a similar task. He added, however, that having many of such entities does not really matter, but what matters is how such bodies will implement their rules and talk to each other with policies. He is of the view that what matters is coordination among these bodies, because if they are set up and they end up working separately, then there is a problem. Adding that therefore he hopes that the coming in of this council will not undermine other institutions. An economic consultant, Exley Sulumbu, shared similar sentiments in a separate interview, indicating that there are many other entities that would have performed similar tasks. He gave an example of the Department of Economic Planning under the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs and the NPC. He is of the view that by now, the country should have known that it does not lack people or plans but implementation. He added that what is needed now is to implement what the country already has. In an interview, the Malawi Confederation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry President Legani Katandula said it would be premature to talk on the establishment of the council since its mandate and composition has not been clearly spelled out. He added that he had not seen what the intended exact mandate of this council would be, therefore it would be premature for him to comment. He is of the view that Malawians should wait and see when the appointments are made and there are more details on what is expected to be done by that council, then it might be the right time to comment. Presidential spokesperson Anthony Kasunda was not immediately available for a comment to justify the appointment of the council.
The past year, 2022, will be a period to forget for consumers, as it was a time the pangs of rising inflation shook homes in Malawi. Prices of basic commodities such as food, clothing, and shelter were seen rising to levels most Malawians described as unbearable. Justin Pweu has the whole story.
The past year, 2022, will be a period to forget for consumers, as rising inflation shook homes in Malawi. Prices of basic commodities such as foodstuffs, clothing and shelter, rent, to be specific, were seen rising to levels most Malawians described as unbearable. For example, the International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI, reported that in January 2022, Maize retail prices averaged 191 kwacha per kilogram, representing 9,550 kwacha per 50 kg bag. However, by December, the price of the staple crop was seen at an average of 25,000 kwacha per 50 kg bag, representing a 162% increase. Similar trends were seen in prices for groceries and other household items such as sugar, cooking oil, bread, wheat flour, soap, and beer products, among other things. This also affected the cost of living, which soared from 235,584 kwacha in January to 325,902 kwacha in October 2022, according to figures from the Center for Social Concern. Such developments reflected the headline inflation figures as computed by the National Statistical Office and cited by the Reserve Bank of Malawi from 12.1% in January to 25.8% in November 2022. Worth noting is the fact that inflation went as high as 26.7% in October 2022, the first time since July 2013. Such trends were enough to press the authorities to review economic fundamentals such as the policy rate. The rate was raised from 12% to 18%, which resulted in a corresponding change for interest rates in commercial banks. However, economist from the Malawi University of Business and Applied Sciences, Bechani Chereni, argues that rising inflation in Malawi is not a case of too much money chasing few goods. Rather, it is a case of vulnerability to imported goods.
For the short term, it's difficult. You're asking me to look into the nitty-gritties of something that I have to be looking at in a hidden room somewhere. But I will tell you that, look, I think for me, there are low-hanging fruits which we have to actually take advantage of. Mega farms, it's for me a very, very short-term solution, commercial agriculture, because I mean, if you're going to harvest something, you just need about 90 days for most of the commodities. You need about 90 days you are harvesting, or maybe at most 120 days you are harvesting, and within that period you can deal with the shortage of the foreign exchange. I'm saying so because remember that most of our inflation is being imported.
Yes.
So we need to have enough foreign reserves in order for us to import commodities at a cheaper price, because we're not a country that should be happy when there's a devaluation. We are not producing. We are a country that should worry when there's a devaluation or a depreciation, for that matter. So with a depreciation, it means automatically that there's going to be inflation. So we need to avoid a depreciation. We need to avoid a devaluation. So how we avoid a devaluation and or a depreciation is for us to look at the supply of the foreign exchange. Let's bring in the foreign exchange through exports. So the quick wins are very, very important. There are those low-hanging fruits which we must take care of, and some of the low-hanging fruits are maybe on the fiscal side, that maybe some sacrifices need to be undertaken. Things like travel of some senior government officials need to be cut to save the foreign exchange. When you have saved that foreign exchange, that's when I think that the imported inflation is going to be dealt with. In terms of the food inflation, we need to produce as much as we can. Maize, a lot of maize we must produce. Ndio also, people are mostly in Malawi, people eat a lot of fish, of different types. So we also need to, emphasize on aquaculture, fish farming. We need to emphasize on that so that at the end of the day, people are able to access food at a lower price relatively. So, and so the same thing should happen, that farmers should be protected. I hope ADMAC wakes up very soon. In the medium to long-term process, my expectation is that we are going to deal with the mining thing quite well, because with mining, it means that we will be able to bring in more dollars, and if we bring in more dollars, or indeed any foreign exchange that you can think about, that is going to solve the problem quite very easily. Then the supply of dollars is not going to be a problem. We are going to have as many dollars as we can, and therefore the currency gains some value. We can begin to celebrate about a devaluation if and when we are able to produce more for export, because we want our exports to be competitive on the world market. But where there are no exports, we can't be talking about competitiveness yet. And then again, also, I think the mega farms themselves, they need to go even much bigger and wider. And the cooperative farming is going to help us. We are going to win a lot in terms of in that sense. But then again, going back to the short-term process, I think that remittances, we are not gaining much in terms of remittances. People are now doing a lot of informal transactions. If you're in South Africa or you're in UK, US, and you need to send some money here, people are not doing that via the banking system anymore. And so we need to provide enough incentives for people to do that. I saw somebody being concerned that they have a foreign currency denominated account, but it's difficult for them to access their money. So that becomes to be a problem. How would people then start to believe that if I have if I'm exporting and I bring in my foreign exchange, I will be able to access it without problem? So those things are again very, very important.
But in its monthly market intelligence report, RBM maintains that it will continue to tighten the monetary space to control inflation. On the fiscal front, Minister of Finance Sosten Gwengwe was forced to increase the 2022-2023 national budget by 10 billion kwacha to meet the rising cost of expenditure and development budgets during the mid-year budget review due to rising inflation. Gwengwe said the rise in headline inflation was largely driven by food and imported inflation propelled by rising global fuel and food prices and the exchange rate, as well as the 25% depreciation of the official exchange rate in May. He said that inflation has piled pressure on fiscal performance due to price escalations for most goods and services. He added that addressing supply constraints will help boost local production as a lasting solution to tame inflation. The Minister of Finance further said that Malawi must produce and export. Beginning this season, therefore, he said, the government is working with the Green Belt Authority, the Malawi Defense Force, prison services, and private sector players, including Press Agriculture, to establish mega farms to increase agricultural production for both local and foreign markets. There is a need for authorities from both the monetary and fiscal fronts to work together if Malawians are to be spared from the pangs of the monster that is inflation in the new year.
Representatives of the Malawi Stock Exchange are speaking highly of performance of the market in 2022, saying it performed exceptionally well in accordance to the economic conditions experienced in the year. The market registered a 31.8% return as of end November 2022, above inflation rate, which signifies a good year for the investors. Furthermore, the market managed to list 21 government debt securities with a face value of 1.12 trillion kwacha, which is a significant step towards deepening the debt market in Malawi. I caught up with MSE Chief Operating Officer Kelin Kondowe, and she explains.
There are quite a number of developments within the market, especially when considering the macroeconomic environment. I think for a start, if you recall, in May, we had a devaluation, 25% that was affected. And as you know, as the Malawi Stock Exchange or as the stock market, it is open to both the domestic as well as the foreign investors. And so it really did have an impact, especially on the ones that are foreign investors, especially in terms of the return. So you find that in as much as even in the month of May, we had recorded a positive return on the market, but you find that when you translate it to the US dollar return, it was quite negative. So that really impacted the performance of the foreign investors. But at the same time, I think in as much as we've observed a good return on the market, I think that does not dismiss the fact that some of the companies were actually negatively affected with developments within the macroeconomic environment. For instance, the devaluation, as well as the overall general inflation that we've also experienced. So you find that some of the companies were set to perform even better, but because of the developments, they haven't really performed as well as they could have. But at the same time, in terms of our business development initiatives as well, there were some companies that we were courting to come to the market, but because of how the environment is, maybe perhaps they felt this is not the right time to come to the market. So those have been some of the challenges that we've really experienced in terms of our operations as well as the operations of the market.
What is the outlook of the performance of the market in the new year?
In the new year, I think we remain to be optimistic. We know that there are quite a number of things that perhaps would direct us to be a bit more cautious in terms of our optimism. But I think looking at how we've performed in 2020, 2021, and then 2022, I think we are on a good trajectory. We do anticipate that with some of the projects that we're embarking on, especially just to drive up activity on the market, I think that will really help in terms of raising awareness of what is happening on the stock market, but even in terms of raising awareness to potential issuers. Because as the Malawi Stock Exchange, you do believe that within the current macroeconomic environment, this is the right time for companies to actually come to the market. Because if you look at perhaps interest rates, they've been on the rise, which if you're used to bank or commercial bank borrowing, it can be quite expensive. So we want to really reroute these companies to say, okay, there is an opportunity for long-term financing that is patient as well as affordable, especially when you look at the both we have the equity as well as the bonds, which have a long term compared to some of the instruments that are available within the money market. So we are trying to push that message ahead forward. And I think we're quite positive that with some of the initiatives that we're also pushing behind, we should see some improvement in terms of overall market operations, but as well as some of the activity that happens on the market.
Why has this been the situation? Is it the factor of entry requirements, or just that companies are shy to join the market, even participation of investors? Not many new investors would join the market. Why has this remained the situation?
I think it is a cocktail of reasons, so to say, in terms of some of the reasons or challenges that we face as the market. On the part of why we haven't seen many companies issuing their securities, I think there are quite a number of factors that can be pointed out. Issues of corporate governance within these companies. You find that most of the private entities, there isn't really that much good corporate governance principles that are being followed. So you find that the founder is both the board chairperson, the CEO, and probably also does much of the operational activities within that entity, or some of them are actually family members. So that does pose a challenge when we go to those entities to say, okay, if you would want to raise capital on these platforms, it would be ideal to actually now have good corporate governance structures, because at the end of the day, this also benefits the company itself. In the sense that at least you as the founder can actually go out of that company and the company still survives because you have put good structures in terms of corporate governance in that entity. So there has been a bit of resistance in that area. But I think one of the other crucial factors or challenges that we're facing as a market, you find that we do not really have deliberate policies or incentives that would bring companies to actually list on the Malawi Stock Exchange. For instance, you find that within other markets, they'll say that they do provide tax incentives. Let's take, for instance, in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange, you find that if a company comes to list on the board, for a limited number of years, you find that they'll have a lower corporate tax that they'll pay. So for instance, one of the issues that we've been advocating for is to say that why don't we now also include or incorporate such an incentive into the market, so that instead of paying 30% corporate tax for the first 3 years, that company can actually pay a lower rate, let's say 25%. So you find that these are things that would actually make the market more attractive to the issuers. But at the same time, I think when you look at the other side as well, in terms of the investing public, I think this speaks to the general issue of the low financial literacy levels within the country. So if you compare with other regions or other countries, you find that the financial literacy levels in Malawi are quite low. And so specifically, when you also look at the stock market, you find that is even lower in terms of the uptake. I think when you're looking at the numbers, we're roughly over 50,000 investors in a population of over 17, 19 million. So it's quite low in terms of penetration of access to the market. On the other side, when we're looking at the investor side, there are quite a number of challenges in terms of awareness. You find that even to date, when some hear about the Malawi Stock Exchange, they ask to say, okay, what is the exchange rate at this particular time, the Malawi or Zambia kwacha, how much is it trading at? So there is generally that lack of awareness of what happens on the stock market. And one of the key initiatives that has been put in place in that regard has been the introduction of financial literacy materials in secondary schools. So this was an initiative that was spearheaded by the Reserve Bank of Malawi in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, where now they came up with source books regarding issues to do with the financial markets. So we believe this is a more systematic approach so that even those children that are now going through secondary school, everyone will have an opportunity to actually learn or understand more about the financial markets as well as the stock market. And we do hope that this will really help in terms of raising awareness of what happens on the Malawi Stock Exchange. Because currently you find that even there could be some people who go through primary, secondary school, even tertiary education, but do not really understand what happens on the stock market. So we want to incorporate this material within the syllabus that they're actually learning. So we hope that this will actually increase the uptake and as well as raise the awareness of what happens on the market. But at the same time, as the Malawi Stock Exchange, as well as in collaboration with all of our key stakeholders, we'll continue pursuing and pushing forward in terms of raising awareness. Currently, I think there is that opportunity in terms of the digital channels that are available. You talk of social media platforms, and currently, I think in 2021, we also introduced a WhatsApp chatbot, which actually does provide answers to some of the frequently asked questions. So those are all the channels that we're currently exploring on and will continue to do so that at least there is that information flow to the public so that they're also aware of the opportunities that are available on the market.
With that item, we've come to the end of today's edition of Business Time. It is a magazine program where we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Chimwemwe Mangazi. But always remember, if it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense. Bye for now.